Old.
When I started, at first I thought maybe it was Judy, but then it just got so bad.
Yeah.
Miss Peters.
Okay. Well, I want to start off by telling a story out of history. Robert Fulton, you might remember, invented the steam engine. He went on to, well, perfect it. Other people were working on the concept of steam engines. What he came up with was a commercially viable steam engine, and figured out how to attach it to a boat and turn paddle wheels and have one of the first powered boats. And he was a genius, not because he came up with a steam engine, but because he was smart enough to realize this was a huge business opportunity and I know nothing about business. So he went and found a partner, Robert Livingston. Robert Livingston was a genius when it came to business and politics. And they formed a partnership. They wanted to run steamships all around New York Harbor. But they didn't want just New York Harbor, they wanted to be able to go up and down the rivers of New York and run ships into New York from other places. So Robert Livingston got to work and got the legislature of New York State to pass a law giving an absolute monopoly on all steam-driven boats and ships to the Fulton Livingston Company. Nobody else was allowed to do it. And as you can imagine, this upset a few people. And they decided they also did something else. Cost started going up of moving people and freight around New York. Because the steamships could do it faster and actually could move bigger ships and more reliably, you didn't have to worry about sails and the wind and the tide. You just started the motor and went. More and more people started having to use it because it was so reliable, but because they had a monopoly, the prices just kept going up and up and up and up, and people complained, but what could you do? Well, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Gibbons decided there was something he could do. He ran steamships in New Jersey. Had his own variation on the steam engine. And Gibbons decided that what he needed was a pilot, a captain, who was daring. And he hired one. And together, they decided to try to break the monopoly. They started ferrying people between New Jersey and New York City for half the price. It was totally illegal. They knew it was illegal. But they wanted to break the monopoly. This was in 1817. So, it started working. People loved it, obviously. Half the price. They were doing so well that they bought a bigger ship and started moving people and cargo. Half the price. Now during all of this, Robert Livingston passed away. And then Robert Fulton, soon after, passed away. And the company went to Livingston's sons, his two sons and his brother. And they were worried. They had a fight, the Gibbons ships, and they knew they could easily go to court and get rulings against them, but they also knew that the people liked those cheaper ships, and if they went to court, they would be the villains. But they were also going bankrupt, so they went to court, and they got an injunction. And Gibbons told his captain, ignore it. And the captain said, ignore what? And set sail. Kept going. Well, they appealed it to a higher court, the injunction. It was upheld. They appealed it to a higher court. It was upheld. They arrested the captain. He got out on bail, kept sailing. Except this time when he got back to New Jersey, that night he had carpenters come on board and build a secret compartment in his ship. And as they started approaching the docks in New York, he would go and lock himself in the secret compartment. Police would board the ship, search it, couldn't find him, and they couldn't arrest anybody else because it's the captain's responsibility back then. Meantime, the crew was loading cargo and people for the return trip. The police would leave, and as soon as the ship was far enough away from the dock, the captain would come out and wave. And this happened over and over and over again while the court battles went on and on and on, until finally it made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, where Daniel Webster argued for the Gibbons Shipping Company, and argued well, because they won. On one simple premise: the Constitution gives power only to the federal government to regulate interstate travel and trade. The monopoly violated that, so it was struck down. Now the captain that Gibbons had hired, he had had his own, actually 2 ships. One, a sailboat that ferried passengers back and forth between New York and New Jersey, and another, a larger freighter that carried cargo from New York to Philadelphia, both wind-driven. When Gibbons came to him and made him an offer to be a captain of his steamboat, he was going to take a big cut in pay. But he saw, 1, he could learn steamships, and 2, if he breaks the monopoly, he can start running his own steamships. And as soon as the monopoly was broken, he quit Gibbons' company, bought up some steamships of his own, and began trading. Began working. Within a couple of years, he had steamships running across the Atlantic. He also began buying up railroads. And before he was done, Cornelius Vanderbilt was the richest man in America. As a matter of fact, they said they've estimated that when he passed away, he owned 1/9 of all the currency that was around at that time, American currency. He built a huge empire. And something else happened. As soon as the monopoly was destroyed, all kinds of other companies started flocking in. Prices started dropping. It was called fair competition. Now if you want to charge a little bit more, you better offer something. You better not be just carrying somebody from New York to New Jersey. You better have a saloon on board, so that as they're going home from work, they can already start drinking. Or have some upper class rooms that you could charge a little more for, so that the wealthy people could sit up there while they traveled across. When they had a monopoly, they didn't care. Just herded you on board and sailed you across. Once it was broken, all kinds of stuff started happening. And Vanderbilt was not the only one to start building a large empire from it all. But it was a lesson that's been learned in this country over and over and over and over and over again. Look at the airlines. It used to cost a fortune to fly anywhere. Nowadays, you search Priceline and Travelocity and some of those other places, you can probably get a flight for less than $90 to a lot of places. They deregulated the airlines. We were told, oh, that's it, all the airlines are going to go under. We actually have more now than we had then. And they're actually competing harder. Okay, yeah. Some of them have decided, let's move the seats a little bit closer so we can get an extra row in. Some of them have recently decided, you want fed? Bring the food on yourself. Which is hard, because try to get food past the TSA. So I don't know if you heard about that, by the way. Just the way my brain sometimes skitters off to side subjects. I think, was it in Detroit? They actually shut down the airport, diverted flights, went on high alert because they discovered one of the metal detectors had been accidentally unplugged. Yeah, wouldn't want to just plug it in. Now, they had to shut down everything because who knows what may have passed through during that time. Might have been some, 2-month-old got through with their formula intact. Can't have that. But we have shown this time and time again in our nation's history. The more you regulate something, the worse it gets. Prices start skyrocketing, service starts dropping. Every single time. And we're seeing it right now with healthcare. The healthcare bill isn't even in effect yet. What is it, 2014 that it goes into effect? A year and a half. Health insurance prices are already starting to go up. Part of that is, of course, all of our taxes have gone up to help pay for the health care bill. We're paying for that for 3 or 4 years before it shows up. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever walked into, say, a car dealership, say, I'll take that $20,000 car, here's the cash, I'll pick it up in 4 years. What we are with healthcare and the effects of it, wow, it's already starting to damage society. Under the healthcare law, insurance companies that in any way cover children must cover children with pre-existing conditions. Has to, absolutely, 100%. So what is happening? Well, so far about 3/5 of all health insurance companies that used to cover children have dropped them. They will not cover children anymore. And they figure that within the next year and a half, all the rest of the insurance companies are going to do the same thing. Because they don't want to be forced into having to cover kids with pre-existing conditions. That doesn't mean that insurance companies before didn't cover some of those kids. There were insurance companies that did. But even they are dropping it. What they had done before is voluntary. They don't want to be forced into it. Because once they're forced into it, they have to obey all the rules and regulations, and they don't want to. So the nation's children will be uninsured. Thank you, healthcare reform. Isn't that wonderful? That ought to help our country be better. Well, of course they won't be. I mean, we'll do it for the kids, won't we? We'll pass an addition to the Healthcare Reform Act, putting all those kids on the Medicare, so that your taxes can go up a little more, well, a lot more. And Medicare is the most efficient health insurance on the planet. We all know that. Why add a couple 100 million kids to it? That ought to make it more efficient. Several companies, quite a few actually, including companies like McDonald's, Wendy's, Apple, I believe, General Electric, have asked for exemptions. You know, they have to insure their workers or they get hit with a penalty. Well, several big companies have asked for exempt us. Not a temporary exemption lasting 1 to 2 years at first. You know they'll ask for extensions. but it's being granted. Why? Well, probably shouldn't get into that. Don't want to risk our tax exempt status, but we'll just leave it there. The rest of the companies, big corporations, employ thousands of people. They're dragging in their accountants and trying to make a decision. Which should they do? Should they insure all of their people or pay the penalty? Which should we do? You know what they're going to do? They're going to do what saves them the most money. They're going to drop everybody's health insurance and pay a fine. In a lot of cases, it might be a fifth of what they're paying in health insurance. So millions of people will have their health coverage dropped. Small businesses of a certain size also have to insure all full-time employees. And we're already starting to see the effect of that. It hasn't even started yet. None of this has gone into effect yet. We're starting to see it already. What are a lot of small employees doing? Employers? Well, they have to insure full-time employees. They don't have to insure part-time. So they're going to take, if you say you have 20 full-time employees, they're going to make them 20 part-time employees and hire another 20 part-time employees, insure nobody, and not have to pay any fines. And then all of those 20 employees are now going to have to, or 40 employees are now going to have to be scrambling to find another part-time job just so they can try to earn what they were before. But they won't be insured. See what great effects we get when we regulate things? Yeah, some things need regulating, I'll grant you that. Before certain regulations went into effect, I mean, I remember when the pollution was so bad on the Cuyahoga River that they literally set the river on fire. You know how hard it is to do that? We did it. Ohio, we can set rivers on fire. It was a proud moment. And yes, there were times when the smog and the pollutants coming out of some factories were horrible. We needed to do something about that. They were destroying water, air. There was all kinds of problems. But things of this nature, we're already seeing how it's going to destroy the economy. What's it going to do to families? Mom and dad will be part-time employees without any insurance. The kids will be insured by Medicare. So mom and dad will be paying a lot more taxes on those two part-time jobs. They're going to have to go get a third part-time job just to make the difference up. And we have known people who worked for hospitals and collected from the insurance companies. Most hospitals, I don't know how many people know this, most hospitals hire an employee to work with each of the major insurance companies. Because it takes one full-time employee calling every single day and, you know, disputing why they're not covering this charge and this form needs to get through, and just constant with the insurance companies. Medicaid, 3 to 4 employees every day calling in, fighting them. You wait until the Health Care Reform Act goes into effect, how many more millions of people suddenly get dumped onto Medicaid. And you know what hospitals, how many people they're going to have to hire then to handle it? Well, if they do what a lot of doctors are already doing, the answer is 0. Matter of fact, they'll probably fire those 3 or 4 people who currently are handling it, because most doctors are refusing to accept Medicaid now. Not most, but it's a growing trend. More and more doctors don't want it. They see what's coming. They know what a nightmare it's going to be. Medicare already is almost impossible to get paid by. Oh, and by the way, do you know who they're hiring to enforce your paying for your health insurance? Who will enforce and make sure you have health insurance? You better have some, because they'll come after you. The IRS. According to the Healthcare Reform Act, they are hiring 16,000 new IRS agents to enforce this law. Why is that the business of the IRS? That you have health insurance?